Alexander Volkanovski returns to face Diego Lopes for the vacant featherweight championship this weekend at UFC 314. I already made my prediction for the rest of the card yesterday, so make sure you go check out that video. And boys, I am really excited for this fight. And I gotta say, for weeks and weeks when this fight was first announced, I was going 50-50 on this dude. I could not determine who was gonna win this. One day I'd say Diego Lopes was gonna win it. The next day I'd say Alexander Volkanovski was gonna win it. And after rewatching tape, after I'd say about the last week of me actually just thinking about this fight, I've come to terms with it. Diego Lopes is simply not good enough for Alexander Volkanovski, dude. Listen, okay, let's start off with the tail of the tape of this fight. Alexander Volkanovski, Diego Lopes, the height. Volk's always going to have a height disadvantage. That's Volkanovski for you. He's dealt with it his whole career. That's not going to be much of a problem. If anything, I think it will be a problem for Diego Lopes. One of Diego Lopes' strong suits is his dunk down. Puts his chin down, head down, and throws an overhand. He's not going to be able to do that overhand as much against Volkanovski. So I think he should transition to an uppercut rather than overhand. You know, you got to think, dude. You got to think. Diego Lopes fights exactly like Justin Gage, dude. I've been rewatching so much of Diego Lopes' fight. They're very similar fighters. You know, I'd say Diego Lopes is just a tad bit more technical, but very similar fighters either way. And the reach, Volk obviously has pretty good reach for being such a short guy. These guys share similar reach, so the reach won't be a problem. The TKO, KO, Volk has 13 TKOs, Diego Lopes has 10 TKOs. The submissions, this is where Diego Lopes clears. Diego Lopes has 12 submissions, while Volkanovski has 3. Volkanovski's obviously never submitted anyone in the UFC. The takedown defense, Volkanovski has 70% takedown defense. Let's be honest, guys. I don't see Diego Lopes getting taken Volk down, dude. Diego Lopes is not going to be able to take Volk down. If Islam could barely take Volk down, then Diego Lopes definitely isn't. The significant strikes landed per minute. You know, this is something I want to stay on for a little bit. Volkanovski with 6.6 and Diego Lopes with 4.2. You know, when we think about Diego Lopes, you think a straight brawler. But Diego Lopes is not that far off Volkanovski's significant strikes landed per minute. But obviously Volk's still higher, and that's what I am worried about. I am worried about Diego Lopes gassing out, which we'll get into a little bit later. But if Diego Lopes gasses out, and Volk has insane cardio, dude. Volk's never had a cardio problem in his 10 years in the UFC. And if Volk is just constantly more active, popping the leg kick, popping the jab, dude, just going back and forth, I do think Volkanovski will pull this off, but we'll get into that later. The striking accuracy, 57, you know, 54% accuracy for Diego Lopes isn't too bad for being a brawler. And the takedown accuracy, Volkanovski has 38% takedown accuracy, and Diego Lopes has 40%. But obviously, Diego Lopes does not shoot as many takedowns as Alexander Volkanovski. Let's talk about the weaknesses of both of these fighters, first of all. The weaknesses of Volk, the clear and obvious one is his chin. Volkanovski is coming off 2 bad KO losses to Islam Makhachev and Ilia Topuria. And I gotta say, Volkanovski was always known as the guy who could take a shot. Volkanovski was known as the guy who could afford to take a couple big shots to the head. But after these 2 losses, I'm unsure of it. And when you're facing a power puncher like Diego Lopes, that might be a problem. But I cannot solely base my prediction on this fight based on Volkanovski's chin. He's had over a year off to recover. He's had time. I'm not going to base a fight off someone's chin. I'm tired of that. That's childish. The weaknesses of Diego Lopes, the main weakness of Diego Lopes is a pretty obvious one, his cardio. Alright, in constant fights, in the Dan Ige fight and the Brian Ortega fight, I want to focus on that fight. A lot of people use the Dan Ige fight as a reason, an example, I should say, of Diego Lopes have bad cardio. Let me tell you, dude, Diego Lopes went through 3 different weight cuts for that Dan Ige fight. He was originally supposed to fight Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega pulled out, had all that stuff. Dan Ige stepped in on like 4 hours notice, and Diego Lopes had to go like yet again another weight cut. They ended up fighting at 165 for that fight. Obviously, you're gonna be a little gassed, dude. Dan Ige just got off the couch. He didn't have to go through any weight cuts pretty much. In terms of the advantages of both fighters, you know, Volk's technical ability, Volk's cardio is an advantage of his, and the advantages of Diego Lopes is just his craziness, dude. His craziness is a very key advantage in this fight. The ability to brawl against a Volkanovski who has been chinned in his last 2 fights. And that is literally why this fight is anywhere near competitive, dude. If Diego Lopes didn't have knockout power, this would be an easy win for Volkanovski. It's just the scare of Volkanovski getting chinned in that first round. That's what scares me, dude. The advantage of Diego Lopes is his ability to clinch, his ability to throw up random submissions. And let me tell you something, dude. Diego Lopes is not going to shoot for a takedown against Volkanovski. The only way this goes on the ground, which is something I can definitely see playing out, Diego Lopes knocking down Volkanovski and hopping straight in the guard. We have seen his ability in a Masvidal-Evelev fight to just throw up random submissions from random spots and almost get him. And Volk, if he's not careful, he could be getting caught in a submission. And you're probably like, bro, Volk's never been submitted in his entire career. Yeah, and he's never fought Diego Lopes his entire career. I don't think a lot of people realize how good Diego Lopes' jiu-jitsu is. You know, a lot of people talking about this fight are just like, oh, bro, Diego Lopes doesn't have any grappling. He's just a striker. This is just going to be Volk. No, that is not true. Diego Lopes has elite grappling. We looked at it earlier. He had like 12 submissions. And Volkanovski, dude, if he gets knocked down and Diego Lopes hops in his guard without a problem, gets an arm triangle, gets some weird submission, well, then we could be seeing Diego Lopes as our champion of the world. So Volk has to be careful of that. But like I said, dude, Volk has the ability to out-cardio Diego Lopes. Volk probably will out-cardio Diego Lopes. His technical ability, he's able to just fight at range, and that sounds crazy because he's a midget, but his reach is pretty good. He did it against Yair Rodriguez. Yair Rodriguez, a tall striker who throws leg kicks pretty consistently. He pieced up Yair Rodriguez. I didn't realize how one-sided that fight versus Diego Lopes, that fight between Yair Rodriguez and Alexander Volkanovski was, dude. Volk was piecing Yair Rodriguez up. But in terms of how I believe this fight will actually play out, my official prediction for this fight, first round, dude, I do think Diego Lopes is going to start off strong. That's a given, dude. Everyone who's ever predicted this fight realizes and recognizes that Diego Lopes is going to probably win the first round, dude. Volk, he's coming off a little bit of a ring rust. Diego Lopes is probably just going to be a little bit more active. But here's a key to victory for Diego Lopes. Don't be too crazy, dude. If you manage your cardio, Volk's coming off a year layoff, dude. He's not going to be the same Volk we know that was even beating Ilia Topuria in that first round. He's going to be a little bit rusty. So win the first round decisively, but be careful, dude. Don't waste all your cardio doing some stupid stuff. And another problem with Diego Lopes, dude, in that Dan Ige fight, in that Brian Ortega fight, Diego Lopes had Brian Ortega stunned. Diego Lopes had Brian Ortega finished, and he did not push for that finish, and that is something that Diego Lopes has to do in this fight. If Diego Lopes has Volk even hindered a little bit, he has to push forward, because in that Brian Ortega fight, he didn't push forward. He was afraid of taking a risk against Brian Ortega, and that's why he didn't finish Brian Ortega. He was afraid of taking a risk against Dan Ige, and that's why he didn't finish them. Diego Lopes has the ability to finish these guys. And I just said, it sounds what I'm saying is a bit contradicting. Diego Lopes has to be careful to not waste his cardio in the first round and decisively win it. But if Diego Lopes gets a big shot off on Volk and stuns Volk, do not give Volk any time to recover. You need to hop on it. And in that scenario, if you do rock Volk, well, then it is okay to waste your cardio, because Volk, that is really Diego Lopes' only chance of winning. Just overpowering Volkanovski, just pushing him against the cage, giving body shots, giving uppercuts, just piecing up Volk against the cage once you get Volk stunned. That is your only way to win this, because as this fight goes on, Volkanovski is just going to be more active. Volkanovski is not going to gas out. Volkanovski is going to be popping the jab. Volkanovski is going to be popping the leg kicks. And Volkanovski has the ability to overcome it. So if this fight gets out of round 2, I don't know, dude. I'd lean towards Volk. But Diego Lopes, I can see him getting the first 2 rounds, like, pretty decisively, and then Diego Lopes has 3 rounds to just win once. I could see a lot of people saying this fight is going to be a robbery. I can see a lot of people saying, oh, bro, Diego Lopes won this fight. And I can also see a lot of people switching up on Diego Lopes after this fight wins, dude. Or after this fight happens. If Diego Lopes loses this fight, everyone's going to be like, oh, he was never that good. This guy was fast-tracked. He was never that good. And I'm scared, because I like both of these fighters. Everyone likes both of these fighters, dude. Diego Lopes, fan favorite. Volkanovski, fan favorite. If Volkanovski loses, he's never getting back into title contention. He's probably done. And if Diego Lopes loses, maybe he can get back into title contention. But that's another thing I've been thinking about, dude. If Diego Lopes loses this fight, well, is he really beating Masvidal again, dude? Masvidal was outstriking Diego Lopes in that first fight. I didn't realize that, but Masvidal actually has good striking. He doesn't utilize it enough. But that's a story for another video. I don't know if Diego Lopes will ever win a belt. This is probably Diego Lopes' best opportunity at winning the featherweight belt. I know that sounds crazy, but dude, Diego Lopes, if he even stuns Volk a little bit, hop on it. Waste all your cardio trying to knock Volk out. That's your only way of winning this, because over the 5 rounds, Volkanovski will be more active. And my prediction for this fight, my official prediction, is Volkanovski gets a 48-47 decision, maybe a 49-40. 6 on one judge's scorecard, because I can see one judge always just trying to be different, and that is my prediction for that fight. In terms of what happens if Volkanovski loses, he is officially out of the top 5. You know, you can't have a loss to Diego Lopes on your resume, but if Volkanovski does win, I think it cements him as the top 4th fighter of all time, dude. Diego Lopes, if he beats Volkanovski, see, I don't know, dude. Obviously, that is a giant win. Having Volk on your resume is insane, dude. And if Lopes does win, well, then I'm kind of scared, because after that, we'll probably see Lopes versus Masvidal, and I don't know if that's a really good stylistic matchup for Diego Lopes. So, if Volkanovski wins, he's top 5 of all time. If Diego Lopes wins, he has the ability to be a dominant featherweight champion, or he can just hand it off to Masvidal Evelev, and that division's cooked now. See, if the only problem I have with Volkanovski winning is if Volkanovski wins, well, then we know he's truly not the best featherweight in the world, because he just got chinned by Ilia Topuria a year ago, and Ilia Topuria is the best featherweight in the world. You know, if Diego Lopes wins, we can always have that mystique, that wonder if maybe Diego Lopes could beat Ilia Topuria, dude. Obviously, that's not the case, but, you know, at least we can just say that to say it. And yeah, dude, that's my prediction for this fight. I have Volkanovski by 48-47 decision. Thank you both for watching. Comment down below if you agree. MMA Outpost out.